So, what is ikigai? So, ikigai means it's a Japanese concept, which means that there is a reason for being. You know. So, what is this ikigai? So, you have several things. You have passion, you have mission, you have vocation, and you have profession. All of them constitute ikigai. And so this is an amalgamation of several things: what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at. So supposing you take a combination of what you're good at, then there is a passion and there is a profession. So that it is satisfying, but there is a feeling of uselessness because you're not earning enough money. So if you are focusing on profession and vocation. Sorry, there is a little bit of disturbance. Somebody is skipped.
Yes, I think everybody should switch off their mics, then it will be fine.
Yeah. So the second is profession and vocation. Thank you. So it's what you can be paid for. So it is a comfortable thing, but there's a feeling of emptiness because you don't feel that creativity which comes with passion and profession. So if you are focusing on what the world needs, so there is a mission and vocation. So there is excitement and complacency, but a sense of uncertainty because you're not really sure about whether what you're doing is right or not. And finally, there is passion and mission, what you love. There is delight and fullness, but no wealth. It's like being a faculty member in a postgraduate institute. Delight and fullness, but no wealth. So, you know, so therefore, when you combine all of them together, then you get a reason for being, and that is known as ikigai. And when you're actually wanting to publish, you want to reach a status of ikigai, which means love, passion, profession, vocation, mission. What you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, what the world needs. Everything is an amalgamation. When it all gets together, then you have a fabulous publication and you reach a stage of ikigai. Now, some of you will know what this is. So, what happened was that why don't we all publish and why aren't we very confident about publishing? So somewhere in 1900s, early 1900s, I think, so Einstein, using his mathematical theories, gave the concept of gravitational waves. And what he said was that all the planets around the sun and everywhere, they are not actually suspended in vacuum. There is a gravitational force which holds them all together. And as this force comes close to this planet, it distorts around the planet, holds it in place, and that is why the distance between the planets remains reasonably constant. Now, there were no telescope, there was no microscope, there was nothing. So what he did was he deduced this from a series of calculations, and then he wrote a paper on this. And later on, now in 2020, we have been able to detect these gravitational waves. And it has been proposed that using these gravitational waves, it will be possible to do interstellar travel at a very high speed. So, what did Einstein do in the early 1900s? What he did was there was a leap of faith. So, whenever you are publishing, there is a leap of faith. There is an idea, it translates into an epiphany. An epiphany is an enlightenment. Suddenly you feel that this idea is worth sharing with others. And then you take a leap of faith in the form of a publication, which then becomes a discovery. So, do you understand the stages? One is an idea, then there is an epiphany or enlightenment. And once that epiphany comes, then you take a leap of faith, and that results in publication. it's like, making a house. You don't make a house without a foundation. So whenever you make a house, you have a foundation. So what you do is you make a foundation for a house. You make, first of all, you dig deep, then you put a lot of cement there, and this is hard work. So most of the residents I've seen, they just start off with a publication. You never start off with a publication. You first start off with a foundation. So what you have to do is you have to actually ask, what is your focus? What is your question? What is it that you want to focus on? It cannot be like a big thing. You have a confined space. You have a limited amount of space. So likewise, every journal has a limited amount of space. So you have to decide that in very short, you have to focus on one idea that you need to share with others. And for that, you need to know what is the total number required, what is the statistical method that you are likely to employ, what is the idea that you need to exploit, okay, and what is the what your focus is going to be. So before you actually start your publication, you have to work with a foundation. And what are the two steps of foundation? One is a good planning. And this good planning is, you can't do it alone. You need an architect to do your planning when you're actually making a house. Likewise, when you're writing a paper, you have to plan properly. And this planning is done with the help of statistical experts. It is done with your guides. It is done with other senior people. And you first plan your project and then you come to a statistically significant number. I have seen so many papers after papers which are being rejected. And the reason why that happens is that there is no statistically significant number. You may be onto a very, very interesting idea or a concept, and yet you will not get a statistical significance simply because you don't have adequate numbers to address the thing. There is another problem. You have only 3 years of duration here, and you take up a project in which there are hardly 3 or 4 cases which are coming every year. And at the end of your 2 years, you suddenly say, well, let me work with, say, 15 patients or 10 patients. You will not get the statistically significant number to prove your hypothesis. And therefore, planning, like you plan a house, planning of your project is of immense significance. The third very important thing is where people often are unsuccessful is a concept of pole dancing versus a stable foundation. So what is pole dancing? So there is a pole on which somebody is trying to contort and do all sorts of postures. You respect this person a lot. Why do you respect this person a lot? You respect this person a lot because supposing, because the person is standing on is trying to do gymnastics on a rod, there is every likelihood that this person is going to fall. And the fact that you can't do it, and this person is requiring extreme effort in order to do all these contortions on a pole. Whereas you see the stone, all those people from Chennai will know about Mahabalipuram and the stone. So this is a huge piece of concrete, and nobody knows how it got there, but it's on a rock, solid rock. And you can sit right next to this concrete stone and you don't worry about it because it's not going to kind of roll down on you. So therefore, the concept of paper writing is also based on this. Whenever you're making a thesis, whenever you're going on to publication, the concept of pole dancing means you take one small point and you go mercilessly after it. There's every chance that at some point in the future, you are likely to fail. Why? Because you are actually pole dancing, you are actually going in a very, very narrow field. And then at the end of it, there is every possibility that you might not be successful. Whereas if you have a solid foundation, and as you go on in your research, you may suddenly find, well, I'm not successful in this particular area. Well, I can diversify a little and maybe become successful in another area. So therefore, when you have a very stable, broad foundation on which you create your edifice or your publication, then you can kind of diversify, you can have several publications, and if one doesn't work, then you can have another publication to make you successful in your career. So therefore, I'll give you an example. You can just say, okay, the role of this enzyme in tuberculosis, is it there or is it not there? Now, what happens is when you do that, if that enzyme is positive, you get a positive result. If it is negative, you get a negative result. Sometimes negative result is also an important part of research, but many times it's something which has already been done before and is of no clinical significance. Whereas if you say, well, let me look at all the cases of tuberculosis, let me look at all the investigations in tuberculosis, and then maybe look at a few enzymes, look at a few other markers, look at their duration, look at the symptoms, and many other things. And then at the end of it, you can focus on those particular areas that you think are important and rational. And that means not only do you get one publication, but you get several publications. Therefore, this is very, very important that a stable foundation is much better than focusing on a very, very narrow area, especially when you have limited amount of time. Now, this is a beautiful slow solar eclipse of August 21st, 2017, which was visible all over India. And what is the message that we get from this solar eclipse as far as your publication is concerned? So what happens is that why were we able to take the photograph, such a beautiful photograph, so showing the corona, showing the black, the shadow of the moon, and you know, how were we able to take it? Because we were prepared for the solar eclipse of August 21st, 2017. We had we had placed the proper equipment for it, and we were following it, and we were expecting it. Now, this is a very, very important thing. When your nature has patterns, nature has laws, and therefore, whenever you are doing something very honestly, very meticulously, you are recording things, then you will see patterns of nature. And if you don't do that, so you say, let me look at all the retrospective cases which have been written by, the first year, take out all the discharge summaries which have been written by first year residents, and then you want to find a pattern in it retrospectively, you can't do it. So therefore, if you really want a publication of value, what you have to do is you have to look at things honestly, you have to meticulously record data. Even your case files, you have to record very meticulously. Your discharge summaries, whatever radiology that you see, you have to record very, very meticulously. And then you see those subtle patterns which nature has to offer to you. And if you don't do that, then you never see those patterns and your paper becomes a very, very average one. Now, the next, a very important concept is which one of these photographs actually represents the solar eclipse? Which one of them? Is it the first one where you can see the small pearl, this is known as the pearl which comes out. So as the shadow is shifting, you can only see a little bit of light, then complete shadow, and you can see the radiations all around, and then again a shift of light. So nature follows patterns. And the other very important thing, which of them is the true observation? Which of them represents the solar eclipse? Well, all of them represent the solar eclipse. It's just a matter of when you're seeing them, when you're seeing the thing, and your perspective to the whole thing. So therefore, whenever you're writing a paper, you must remember there is nothing like right or wrong. So whenever you have a guide who just says, well, I have an observation and this is my observation, and you write a paper on this, the premise with which the paper is starting itself is wrong. Because if you have an open mind and you are meticulously recording the patterns of nature, you will make observations which may be different from that of your guide, and yet your observations may be as true as that of your guide. And the reason for that is he or she is looking from his perspective or her perspective, and you are looking at it from your perspective, and both the phenomena are completely correct. So therefore, it's very, very important to record every clinical finding, every radiological finding, every investigative finding, every follow-up finding meticulously all through your 3 years. and then you will start seeing subtle patterns. And the way you see it may be completely different from the way your colleague sees it, or your peer sees it, or your guide sees it. But both the phenomena are correct because each one of you is looking at it from your own perspective. Then the next, another important thing is, what this is, the topmost books in English, when they kind of analyzed the plots of all these books, it's very interesting. So, supposing you have The Winter's Tale, or you have Oscar Wilde's Art and Mortality, or you have The Terror, or The Pilgrim's Progress, or The Road to Oz. These are all topmost books in English language, and they're like classics. All of them are classics. Like you have Tom Sawyer, you must have heard of Tom Sawyer. So, what they did was Wind in the Willows, you must have heard about it. When they started analyzing the book, the plots of the book, they found that all the books of English literature, all the popular books of English literature, only followed certain patterns. So there is sadness followed by happiness, and then a little sadness. There could be happiness, then sadness, then happiness. So it started with sadness, then there was happiness, then there was sadness, then there was happiness. Or it started with happiness, went on to a little sadness, and then it never came around. So, for example, it was like one event after the other, and it never it became normal. Or there was sadness, then happiness, and then sadness. Or there was happiness, sadness, happiness, sadness. So you see, this is diagrammatically opposite of this. So therefore, it's very interesting to see that even when you're looking at lots of English language books, which have become popular over the years, and then you break them down mathematically into their sadness and happiness, you again see a pattern. Are you understanding? So you can break everything, every nature's phenomena into patterns, provided you honestly analyze them and you look at them. And this is very, very interesting. Now, when you read a book, you look at it from happiness and sadness, but not your course book. It's only sadness there. So you get that flat line. Then you see, if you look at it properly, then you might get this curve. So you may get happiness, which is right now when you're just starting, then sadness, and then when you complete your MC at somewhere here, then you get happiness here. So even there you get that pattern, you understand, which you really have to look for in everything that you do. So it's very interesting that there are patterns, and it depends on the perspective of the observer. For example, this curve can be completely inverted for me as the head of the department. So for you as a resident, it can be happiness, then a lot of sadness in the middle of your residency, and then happiness at the end of it. For me, it can be the opposite. I can say sadness here, and then happiness when you're trained, and then sadness when you leave. So you understand again a pattern. So I can get this pattern, and you can get this pattern in the same residency program. So for me, right now it's sadness because you're not trained. When you're completely trained, it's a lot of happiness. And then sadness as you leave, and I'll get a new set of residents whom I have to retrain again. You understand? So the same situation may be this pattern for you and this pattern for me, and yet both of them are universal truths. You understand? So the perspective of a publication depends on the perspective of the beholder. You understand? So it's not, so there is nothing like a false thing. As long as you have documented it honestly, sincerely, you will get patterns which will be true to your own perspective, if you understand what I mean by this. So, our famous book, Harry Potter, you see, you have happiness, sadness, then happiness, then sadness, so Deathly Hallows. Harry Potter, the Deathly Hallows, when you look at it, you see happiness, sadness, happiness, then sadness, then sadness, then happiness, then sadness, then happiness. So, the whole book follows a pattern. And the other very interesting thing is that wherever, supposing if the story were to end here, okay, then you will get this curve. If the story were to end here, you will get a separate curve. If the story were to end here, you will get a separate curve. And since the story ended here, it became a happy ever after curve. You understand? So, whatever the end, the story is still being made. Please understand these 3 points. One is nature has patterns if you follow those patterns meticulously, you will see a lot of things. The second important thing is that each pattern is interpreted according to your own perspective. And when you interpret it according to your own perspective, every perspective is true, provided you have recorded it honestly. And the third is whatever is your temporal duration of looking at that observation, that is still the true story. It may be different from somebody else's story who's looking at a longer temporal duration of the story. You understand? It may be different from a person whose temporal duration is much shorter than yours. So each of them will be still true observations of the natural phenomenon. Therefore, this is a very, very important perspective that each one of you has to realize. So you must never lose confidence. You must not never give in to the fact that your guide is disapproving of your observations as long as they have been recorded absolutely honestly. And that is where scientific temper is made. Then there is another very important perspective to the paper. And I apologize to Dr. Punita as I play this slide. If I play this anymore, then I mean I'll be thrown out. But you know what this is. So why? I mean, this is not relevant to the theme of the story. There's nothing there. But the director has put it into the entire thing. And the other very interesting thing, you still remember the song. It's such a catchy song that after maybe 20 years of this song, you still remember this song, and you remember the movie through this song. Do you understand? So this is an item number which is often placed into the movie, and it's a very nice technique so that you will remember the music, you will remember the song, you may not remember the movie, and you can relate to the movie looking at this item number. You understand? Now, a publication is also like that. Whenever you're writing a paper, you must always ask yourself this question: what is that one important fact which, when I bring out, it will really make everybody attracted towards the paper and make them remember it forever? It can be a very, very small thing, it can be a very big thing. But whenever you are looking at a publication or a paper, then it's very important for you to look for one single message, which is the essence of your paper, which will make it an item number which people will remember it by. And this is something that you must meticulously look for in every paper. Many times I get publications and papers which have been submitted to me by residents. And then I say, there's no catch to it. There's nothing very special, so it won't be published. What you need is anything that you do. It's your first-hand experience. It's not somebody else's experience. It's your first-hand experience, and that will be unique. So look for an item number, look for a message. Like in this talk, when you talk about this talk tomorrow, you will say, Dr. Bihari actually gave an item number in paper. And so this, up to 1 or 2 years ago, I presented this talk to another set of residents, and the everybody who was in that talk say, "Oh, are you giving the item number again?" So remember, so in this talk also, this is attracting people to the talk and is also conveying what I want to convey. Do you understand? This is exactly what you need to do in every publication. Give an item number which truly and uniquely represents your message that you really want to give to it. Now, this is another, everybody knows this lady. I'm sure everybody knows this lady who turned out to be Miss World for India, and we're all very proud of her. But I want to ask you one very pertinent question. You have another lady, very beautiful young girl, who's smiling. Which of them is more beautiful? Which of them is more beautiful? The one on the left, who's wearing the crown, or the one in the right, who's wearing this mala in her neck? Whom do you think is more beautiful? I mean, if you leave the external appearance, they're both equally beautiful, right? They're both equally beautiful. They're equally vivacious. They're equally attractive to you. You understand? You remember this, the girl in the crown, because she was your Miss World. You don't remember this one because this is a picture which is taken from the internet and which is equally catchy. You understand? So, but both are equally beautiful. But will you allow this girl here to actually go to a Miss World contest dressed like this? You will never allow this to happen. You make her, you will clean her up, you will give her nice clothes, you will make sure she's looking beautiful, and then when she appears in a Miss World contest, then certainly you never know, she might turn out to be the winner for you. And this is exactly what happens in a paper. Presentation is extremely vital. It's not only that you can just give some beautiful data there, or an amalgamation of paragraphs. It shouldn't be like that. It has to be presented well. And when you present something well, then even what you think is not really beautiful in the beginning turns out to be extremely beautiful in the end. And therefore, please pay a lot of attention to the statistical methods used, whether they are right or wrong, and also to the language used. So even, I mean, if you go to Japan or if you go to China or any other country, they don't know English, but it doesn't matter. They go to a language expert and they will say, please edit my paper. And then they will send it abroad. So, I mean, just because your mother tongue is not English doesn't mean that you will neglect this very important aspect of a paper. And I've seen very good papers being rejected simply because their statistical methods were not correct or their language was not appropriate for that particular publication, so that the message was not coming across. So when you send a beauty queen to a beauty contest, whether the beauty queen is this lady or the beauty queen is this lady, both of them will win the contest provided their presentation is perfect. And this is very, very important. Another very important thing is that in 1936, in this book by William Faulkner, who incidentally won the Nobel Prize for another book, but this book by William Faulkner has the longest sentence. It has 1,288 words. Now, who can read a sentence which has 1,288 words? You will lose the link. So it's not about language. It's not about using difficult words. It's about conveying your concept, conveying your idea, conveying your thoughts. And therefore, use simple language, use simple words, use simple sentences. And I'll tell you one, you must read this book, The Old Man and the Sea. This book is only 128 pages. And in this book, this has won the Nobel Prize in Literature, The Old Man and the Sea. And you just see the sentence construction. No sentence has words which are more than 10 or 7 to 10. So beautifully written, no difficult words, no long words, short sentences, no difficult words, and yet it conveys what you want to convey. The other very interesting thing is that in my 6 years as editor, any foreign publication which came to my journal, and 40% of the publications were from foreign countries, every statistic, every reference was correctly mentioned according to the journal. But every Indian author without exception, no matter how important he was, he may be head of Indian Council of Medical Research, he may be director of whatever, every single reference was not written correctly. And we really neglect to reference your article according to the referencing of that journal. It is extremely annoying to the editor. So if it's a borderline paper wherein you have kind of done the sentence reconstruction well, you've done the statistics well, you have done the referencing well, the editor will say, well, it's a borderline paper, but I still accept it. But if he has to go again to correct all the references, he has to correct all the English again, all the mathematics again, he will say, forget it, I'm going to actually reject this paper. Then a very important thing is, when you start writing a paper, how do you write a paper? So most people will follow the Imbrad pattern. And what is the Imbrad pattern? Introduction, material methods, results, and discussion. So this is known as Imbrad: introduction, material methods, results, and discussion. But when you're actually writing a paper, you never follow the Imbrad pattern. What you do is you follow the M-RADI pattern, which is first you write the material methods. Okay. Then with the material methods, you write the table and results. And based on the results, then you write the discussion and finally the introduction. You must always remember that. And as a journal editor, when I'm reading your paper, I will never look at your introduction. I will never look at your discussion. I will first read your methods and I will read your results and your tables. If I find that there is something of importance in your material methods and results, then I will go to discussion and to introduction. Otherwise, I will not even read your introduction and your discussion. Please remember, I'm talking as editor-in-chief of a very major journal. So please understand that your methods and results, if they are not appropriate, nobody will read your discussion. So putting too much emphasis on discussion is of no use. Your material method and results is the substance of your publication. The other very important thing about your publication is that your discussion, when you're writing a discussion, I've often seen that all of you will just gather sentences from a lot of papers and then you put it all in your paper and that becomes your discussion. It's not like that. What we are interested in is you go to your result section, whatever are the messages of your result section, you please take all those methods take all those messages, write them in your own words, and then supplement other publications to just add to your own methods. Don't actually go on to don't just patch up your discussion. This is what everybody does. Always your own thoughts should first be written down and then they should be followed up. What is the difference between a prospective and a retrospective study? In a prospective study, every single parameter is already well defined, which means that you have to say, well, this is how I will do every case. So you cannot say, well, I had a plan for an X-ray chest for this patient, but I did not do it because of certain reason, because it could not be done. No, every prospective study, whenever you are making a prospective protocol, should have every parameter fulfilled in that prospective study. In a retrospective study, however, you can say, well, this thing is missing, this fact is missing, these CT scans are missing. But in a prospective study, when you have made a protocol for a prospective study, that every single parameter has to be completed, and that is why a prospective study in which you will first decide what you want to do and then do it, this is certainly more valuable than any retrospective study that you carry out. And finally, why do you respect Michelangelo and his David? Simply because it's an original piece. So the probability of acceptance of a paper is clearly based on the originality of the paper. So the more original the paper, the more original the thought, the greater is chance of acceptance. And this is absolutely true. One small word about parametric and non-parametric data. So when you have a lot of data and it follows a Gaussian curve like this, so there will be outliers here, but these outliers will not really influence your results. So whenever you have a normal distribution and you have a large number of patients, then you follow a Gaussian curve and you can put mean, median, mode. These are parametric statistics. But whenever you have less number and the data is very, very scattered, then you follow a non-parametric pattern. Say, for example, you have only, say, 10 values. Now, supposing you have an 11th value, this represents 1/10 of the total data. But if you have 100 values, then 1 represents 0.1% or 0.01% of the data. So 0.01 will not influence the actual result as much as 1/10 will influence. So whenever you have lesser number, and when you have a data which is very irregularly placed, then you follow non-parametric statistics. And whenever you have a very smooth data which assumes a normal Gaussian curve, then you can use mean median mode. In a non-parametric statistics, you have interquartile range, and you must understand that you cannot follow parametric statistics in this. So this, your statistician will be able to tell you whether parametric statistics or non-parametric statistics are used. In a very broad term, any number less than 30, you cannot use parametric statistics. So if you have any number in your entire thing which is less than 30, you cannot follow parametric statistics. Now, finally, I'd like to come to the great Indian quagmire. What is this great Indian quagmire? So whenever you appear for an interview, whether it is for getting into a job or anywhere or some fellowship or wherever you go, everybody will say, how many papers? How many papers are produced in international journals? And now this is the very, very narrow way of looking at it. And I have been continuously talking about it at wherever I go as an expert, I talk about it. So what happens is that this quagmire means is a quicksand. You're just sinking into this quicksand. Whenever somebody asks you this paper, how many papers and how many papers are published in international journals, this is a great Indian quagmire, and I'll tell you why it's a great Indian quagmire. Now what happens is, so you have an international journal. Initially, it's a small journal. Then what happens is, you send your paper because they say you need an international journal. So you will cite all international journals. I get theses from AIMS, PGI, SGPGI, so many places, 23 places I have been examiner. And not a single Indian paper is cited. They will only cite Western literature. They say, oh, well, that is an important journal. I will only cite it. Now, what happens is, when you cite it, this journal becomes important. You understand? Its impact factor goes on increasing because of your citation. When its impact factor goes on increasing because of your citation, what will it do? When it looks at an American, when you look at it in an international author, the acceptance rate will be high. An American journal will accept American authors much more than you because they understand this. But they will start reject you as an Indian author. So your acceptance becomes low. So what is happening is, you are feeding them. Okay, you are increasing their citation index, you are making them more important, and what are they doing? They are actually rejecting more and more of your articles. Do you understand? Whereas what happens to Indian journals? Indian journals, the international authors don't cite and the Indian authors don't cite. But the Indian journals will accept both international authors and Indian authors. And so the value becomes less simply because their impact factor becomes low. You understand? So what happens is that the international author will again cite his own journal. He will never cite an Indian journal. And the Indian author will also not cite his own journal. It will cite the international journal. So what will happen? The Indian journal never achieves the impact factor of an international journal. As soon as an Indian journal starts reaching the impact factor of an international journal, the entire thing reverses. All the international authors start sending articles to Indian journals. And this has been my experience. When it went from 1.4, the impact factor, it went to 2.76. All the neurosurgeons of the world started sending articles to our journal, and it became a very, very important journal. Do you understand? So you must remember that you must always cite Indian authors. Two things happen when you cite Indian authors. First of all, it authenticates your work. What happens is, oh, so AIMS has also done something like this. Oh, PGI has done something. GV Pant has done something like this. So what happens is, the editor knows, okay, this is a disease which is common in this part of the country. And therefore, when he gets so many cases of this sites, so many cases of this disease, it is fine. This disease is prevalent in India. But the other very important thing is, as your impact factor increases, as the citation of all your professors increase, everybody starts acknowledging you. So if I'm working in an area, if I receive a lot of citation in that area, then everybody in the world says, well, there is one person there who's actually doing this. So all the peers who are working in one particular area, all of them get importance simultaneously. The common tendency here is, oh, I should not cite my colleague. This is a completely wrong thing. We should all cite each other. When you look at other countries, you will find that their peers will always cite their own publications. And this is the reason why they cite, because their journals get important and ours don't. And if you start citing your own journals, then your journals will also become equally important. This is a very, very important part of the whole thing. The final thing is that about plagiarism. What is any photograph that used from anybody else without permission and without referencing that person constitutes plagiarism. If you are using a sentence used by another person, and this sentence has more than 50 words which have been quoted by another person, and you are not actually referring that sentence to that person, it constitutes plagiarism. So remember, anything more than 50 words, if you are just directly verbatim copying on your paper without a reference, it constitutes plagiarism. And this is absolutely not done. The second is ethics in publishing. Now, why do we have an ethical committee in which you have to submit your project before it is published? And this ethical committee does two things. One is it understands, it authenticates your work. When something has been passed by an ethical committee, it means only you are entitled to doing it in your institution and nobody else can do it from your institution. The second very important thing is what they look at is there some practice which is being done in the paper which is so exotic that it can harm a patient, or it can financially impair a patient, or it is a procedure which is not acceptable in the common sense of the word, or it is the giving of a medicine which has the potential to harm a person. So all these ethical things have to be looked at. The other very important thing is conflict of interest. I've often seen this. Somebody writes a thesis and somebody else writes a paper on this. That is a conflict of interest. The other conflict of interest is supposing you are getting funding from a company, and then you say, because this company is funding me, so all the products which are being produced by this company are out of the world. That is a conflict of interest. You have to declare conflict of interest before you publish all these papers. So plagiarism, ethics, and conflict of interest, these are three very, very important factors that you need to do. And to conclude, I'd like to share with you this cartoon, which is a beautiful cartoon, which really tells everybody what I want to say. The road to failure is actually the path of least persistence. Remember this in everything that you do. I'll repeat it again. It's a beautiful saying. The road to failure is actually the path of least persistence. As soon as you stop persisting with something, that is the sure shot formula to fail. You have to persist, persist, persist. You have to doggedly persist. Whatever is your idea, people may criticize, people may get angry, people may laugh you off. It doesn't matter. The road to failure is actually the path of least persistence. The day you stop persisting with your own thing, that's the day you fail. Otherwise, you will get the path. And therefore, persistence is important. Rejection is a process, not an end. So whenever you get a paper which is rejected, don't worry. Nobody wants to reject a paper. No editor in his right mind wants to reject a paper. They want to accept every paper that they can get because of two reasons. They solicit your papers. You understand? But what happens is that the reviewers will give you very pertinent comments, respect the reviewers, again modify it and send it to another journal. It will make your paper better. And then suddenly you find that if you keep a paper somewhere for some time and then you go back to it, you will find that it was so full of mistakes which you have completely missed out. And therefore, rejection is a process, not an end. You must never think of it like, oh my God, my paper is never going to be published. I'm bad. I'm not good enough. There will be one journal which will publish your paper, provided you have addressed all the concerns of the reviewer. So I will end by again repeating this. The road to failure is actually the path of least persistence. Thank you very much for your kind attention. And I'm grateful to Dr. Punita for allowing me to make this presentation.